One of President Biden's campaign promises in 2020 was eliminating student loan debt. Well, this past Friday, he did just that for some Americans. The Biden administration announced that it would forgive nearly $4.3 billion in debt for nearly 55,000 Americans who work in public service. Comes after significant fixes that the Board of Education made to the public student loan forgiveness program. Well, joining me now with more is Ted Rossman. He's a senior industry analyst at Bankrate. Ted, it's great to see you ahead of the holidays. We have a lot to cover, including the latest on credit cards. But for these 55,000 Americans who will be impacted by this news, what does it mean for them?
It's a wonderful Christmas present for them. Basically, as we know, courts struck down President Biden's plan for universal student loan forgiveness. So what the administration has instead shifted towards is more targeted relief, and specifically that public service loan forgiveness program. The rejection rate for that program was 99%, which is pretty staggering. There were a lot of technicalities and loopholes, and people thought that they were spending 10 years paying down their student loans, working in jobs like government jobs, police officers, teachers, nurses, public service kind of jobs, and expecting to get student loan relief. And then for the vast majority, it wasn't happening. So that's really what the administration has shifted towards after universal forgiveness was struck down. They have now delivered student loan relief to about 1 million people in that once troubled student loan forgiveness program for public service workers.
Well, speaking of debt, Ted, I do want to reference a recent Bankrate study, in fact, of course, that your organization has put out specifically about credit cards. What can you tell us about credit card rewards and how people can use them to their advantage?
About 1 in 4 rewards credit card holders haven't redeemed any rewards over the past year, which pains me to admit because that's a lot of people missing out on a lot of real value. And this is a really good time to take stock of what you have. Credit card points, airline miles, hotel points, they have real value. Unused gift cards, too. We did a study about that. About half of us have them. The average is $244. For credit card rewards, it could be substantially higher than that. Sometimes these are out of sight, out of mind, but just like our stocks and bonds and cash, these are currencies. These have real value. You ought to take stock of what you have and make a plan to use it in the new year.
And in terms of the best ways to maximize those rewards, Ted, what would you tell our viewers?
Travel is often the most lucrative, but it's also more complicated. So cash back is actually Americans' favorite credit card reward because it's very simple, it's straightforward. You could get something like a no annual fee 2% cash back card, maybe the Wells Fargo Active Cash or the Citi Double Cash. Just get 2% back on everything. That adds up over the course of the year. Now that's a baseline. You can do better in certain categories. I would urge people to lean into categories in which they spend a lot of money. I have a credit card that gives 6% back on groceries. That's the Blue Cash Preferred from American Express. It may give 1% on many purchases, but 6% back on groceries is huge for a family of 4 like mine. Now, I did say travel is more lucrative and it's more complicated. You have to know yourself. Are you willing to put in the work to find the best deals? Do you have the flexibility to travel on the optimal dates? If you know what you're doing and you put in a little work, travel can be more lucrative, but cash back is more appealing to the masses, I would say.
Ted, I do want to get your take on credit card rates going forward because we had heard from the Fed chair in its final decision of the year last week, noting that it does see sticky inflation ahead. And because of that, rates might stay close to where they are now. What does that mean for credit card rates?
Credit card rates are going to stay high. The average right now is 20.3%. That's only fallen slightly from a record that we saw over the summer, which was about 20.8%. It's going to be slow going if you're waiting for Fed rate cuts to affect your credit card balance. Because let's be honest, even if the Fed cut a few points from here, which could take years, you're still talking high teens. There's not going to be substantial relief for credit cards unless there's some sort of legislative action. That's a real wild card. President-elect Trump did propose a 10% credit card rate cap on the campaign trail. I don't see that happening. That's actually 5 points to the left of where Bernie Sanders proposed. When push comes to shove, I don't think Congress or the government are going to act on that. So I really think it's on the individual. Fed rate cuts are going to be slow to trickle in. I would say get a 0% balance transfer card, move your high cost debt over to a card like the Wells Fargo Reflect or the Citi Simplicity that won't charge interest for up to 21 months, or maybe work with a reputable credit counselor like Money Management International that could bring your rate down to 7 or 8% over 4 or 5 years. The average American has about $6,400 in credit card debt, according to TransUnion. This is your highest cost debt for most households by a wide margin. So it's a popular New Year's resolution to pay it
Yeah.
down.
How do you see that changing over time, Ted? And historically speaking, how does current levels of credit card debt compare to what we've seen in the past?
These are record levels for credit card debt, and the figure is actually up about 50% from the beginning of 2021, which sounds alarming. I would point out that some of this is kind of a proxy for economic growth because we're talking balances. Half of cardholders pay them in full every month, so they don't owe interest, and life is great for them. So, to some extent, it shows economic growth, population growth, more card usage, and less cash. But for that half that is paying a hefty interest rate, that's where it's really significant. Now, even there are mixed signals. I mean, the delinquency rate's at its highest point since 2011, which sounds bad. On the other hand, the debt to income ratio is pretty low on a historical basis. Most people are doing okay, but all news is local. And it reminds me of that saying about credit cards are like power tools, really useful or dangerous, depending on how you use them. The gap is growing between someone who's using cards for rewards and convenience versus someone who's using it just to get by. And it is really holding back their overall financial well-being.
Ted Rossman, Senior Industry Analyst at Bankrate. Ted, thank you so much for joining us, especially ahead of the holidays.
Of course, thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.